a pleasure to welcome Dr. Lockshin, Dr. Marty Lockshin, of course, who spent many, many years in Toronto and as professor at York University and made Aliyah. The time flies. What are you, Aliyah, 8 years? How long are you been in
9 years
Israel?
ago, we just
9 years.
had.
I apologize. I apologize, and really always a pleasure to welcome him. And we decided on Selichot. I warned them, I don't know how many people are so interested in Selichot, but Baruch Hashem, nice to see everybody here. And with that, Professor Lockshin, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back at Torah in Motion, and I hope that we'll enjoy these sessions about something that, from the time that I was a child, I never particularly enjoyed Selichot. I'll admit that when I was a kid, I thought that Selichot was something that happened once a year on Saturday night, either a few days or a week and a half before Rosh Hashanah. And it's nice that so many synagogues in Toronto would take advantage of the Selichot program and the Selichot evening, and they would have a program and there would be lectures, but often the Selichot themselves were not the highlight of the evening. Some shuls, of course, had cantors, and some of them even had choirs, and they would put on a show there. But Selichot was never the Selichot themselves never were such an attractive kind of thing. I can even remember, young people used to go on dates to Selichot because it was something to do at night. But the highlight wasn't the service. Wasn't the service itself. I can remember the shock when I got a little bit older and I discovered that Selichot is not something that happens just one night, that actually goes on for a couple of weeks. And for most of the years of my life, either when I was in yeshiva or when I was living in Toronto and going to B'nai Torah congregations, Selichot was just something that you had to do when you went to daven. So you had to get up earlier in the morning, and you would mumble through various prayers that were extremely difficult to understand. And I can't remember when the first time was that I went to Selichot where there was actually communal singing. Certainly not in the first 30 or 40 years of my life that I ever attend a Selichot service like that. Things have really changed. They have particularly changed here in this country where I'm speaking from Jerusalem. I don't know whether you can read the writing here in this ad that I saw in yesterday's newspaper, and I was just listening to the radio, and they're advertising hotels. There are hotel discounts here in Jerusalem in September, and in many hotels you can get a 20% discount on the hotels. And why? Because there are exciting things happening in Jerusalem in September. There's a beer festival. If you look at the bottom of the line here, the slide, Festival Kolo Bira with Birot, Shefim, V'Hofaot Chayot, live presentations and beer. There's something called Museon Infinity on the left-hand side of the ad here. I don't know what that is. There's on the right-hand side, there's Shavua Ha'itzuv Yerushalayim, fashion, the fashion week in Jerusalem. And in the middle, there is Yerushalayim Birat HaSlichot, the capital of Selichot. This is the place to come, be here or be square. This is where you should be for Selichot. It's very different from my experience in Toronto growing up. And here's, in case you are worried that it's difficult to get around Jerusalem at night, they're assuring you that the bus service and the light rail service have all been extended. and you will be able until 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning to be getting to Selichot. It's become this kind of attraction. For those of you who are interested, you can go to the Jerusalem City Municipality website, and they tell you, the experience of Selichot, what you can do in Selichot here in Jerusalem. And you can, if you're here, those of you who are here in Jerusalem, next week, 2 hours after our session finishes, you can spend 50 shekels to go to a professional quality Selichot concert taking place at the Khan Theater. Sharim Selichot v'chatzrot HaChan. People will be singing musical instruments there. People will be performing Selichot. I'm going to try to do something now. I hope it will work. I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and I'm going to try to share a different screen where you can see some of the things that are going on in Selichot in this city. I hope that the sound will work here. If it doesn't work, somebody send me a chat message saying that the sound doesn't work. Here's
Got the idea.
So that's what Selichot looks like at some places here in Jerusalem. I also have another little video, which I'm not going to bother showing you, of what Selichot are like at the Kotel, with people standing there chanting together. Were you able to hear the audio in that last presentation? Good. So
a little bit.
yes, Selichot has become a true happening here in this city. It's hard for people who just are acquainted with Selichot the way we normally do them in Chutz La'aretz, to imagine this becoming such a communal kind of event, but I hope that we will be able to understand a little bit about what is happening here in these sessions. So I found an interesting article in the newspaper Makor Rishon, written by Professor Ari Geiger of Bar Ilan University, an expert in medieval Jewish studies. And a few years ago, in 2015, Professor Geiger wrote, as of last year, I've stopped saying Selichot in a Sephardic minyan. I'm sorry, I have started saying Selichot in a Sephardic minyan. You can tell from Professor Geiger's name that he is an Ashkenazi, and all of his life, like me, he's been going to Ashkenazi kind of Selichot. But he said that he changed. He switched over to a Sephardic minyan. I came at first because of the words of the liturgy. I stayed because of the atmosphere and the communal singing. So I tried to give you a little taste here of the atmosphere and the idea of communal singing, which has become an important part of Selichot here. There are, I should mention, here in Jerusalem, there are Selichot tours. You can go to neighborhoods of Jerusalem first of all, in the old city, but also in other neighborhoods here in Jerusalem. You can go and they take you on a tour of the neighborhood, and then you come to a place where they're reciting Selichot there, and you get a sense of the flavor of the neighborhood because they are singing the Selichot. In Sephardic Selichot, as in Sephardic davening, praying, everything is chanted out loud, and there is not the atmosphere of mumbling that we are very often used to in Ashkenazic services and in Ashkenazic Slichot. So what does Professor Geiger mean when he talks about that he switched because of the words of the liturgy? Someone is not muted talking. Is that you, Rabbi Kelman? There's some noise in the background there. Sorry. Okay. Rabbi Kelman, I think it says that you.
Sorry, no. I had to mute the person. I had to make myself host. I'm sorry. Now you can share the screen. I didn't realize it.
Share the screen
So I apologize for that.
Okay, very
Only
good.
the host or co-host can mute people.
Very good. Okay. Thank you for watching out for that, Rabbi Kelman. So what does he mean that he came because of the words of the liturgy? What is different about the words of the liturgy in Sephardic Slichot? So there's a framework for the Slichot. I'm not going to be talking about the framework for the Slichot. The framework for the Slichot it consists of some introductory, the Ashrei, some introductory verses. At the end, there's Tachanun, there's Ashamnu. These are standard things, but the center of Slichot, what we normally refer to when we talk about Slichot, we're talking about the liturgical poems that are referred to as Slichot. There is, I'd say, a pretty significant difference between the kinds of liturgical poems that are used in Sephardic Slichot and the kind that are used in Ashkenazic Slichot. And so let's take a look at probably the most famous Sephardic poem for Slichot that is heard all around this country. I'll read it in Hebrew and then in English. I should just say nobody is quite sure who composed this Slicha or even what century it was composed in. Ben Adam, Malacha Nirdam, Hum Karaba Tachanunim, Shvoch Sicha, Drosh Slicha, Me'adon Ha'adonim, Rechatzu Tahar, Va'alta Achar, Beterem Yamim Ponim, Mehera, Rutz La'ezra, Lifnei Shochen Me'onim, Umi Pesha, Vegam Resha, Brach, Ufchad Me'asonim, Ana She'e, Shimcha Yod'e, Yisrael Ne'emanim, Lacha Adonai HaTzedakah, Velanu Boshet Hapanim. Many of you will recognize that last line there. Lacha Hashem Hatzdaka Velanu Boshet Hapanim. It's a line from Tachnun that we recite regularly as part of the Tachanun.
Marty, can you
Yes?
do something about those blue? We're all seeing blue blocks in front of. It looks like your PowerPoint is. I don't know what it is, but there's blue blocks that are blocking the words.
Do other people see that? I don't see that.
Yeah, somebody just sent a communal message.
Yes.
That's good.
Yes.
Yeah. I was wondering about the thing. There's a gray on the top and the
PowerPoint.
bottom. That's if you don't see it, you'll have to work it for next week.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't see anything here.
Yeah, I understand. We can see most of the screen, so whatever. You'll get your grandchildren to work on it for next week,
Right.
And we'll play. Okay.
I'm sorry about the technological problem. The poem is a pretty simple poem, and you can see there's a fairly, if you can see the words, you can see there's a pretty simple rhyme scheme here. All of the lines end in the same sound. Tachanunim, adonim, ponim, onim, asonim, nemanim, panim. And there's also internal rhyme in the middle of each line. Ben Adam, Malacha Nirdam. This opening line here, a number of people will recognize. First of all, Ben Adam, son of man, is what the prophet Yechezkel is called in his prophecies when God speaks to him. But Malacha Nirdam Kum Kara is from the prophet Yonah, when Yonah is sleeping, and they go to Yonah on the boat, and they tell him that he should wake up, and he should cry out to his God, because everybody on the boat is crying out because of the storm on the sea in the book of Jonah. And so this is a reasonable thing to say about Selichot that are being recited either late at night or very early in the morning, turning to people and saying, "What are you doing sleeping? Get up! It's time to present your petition." I'll just read through the English here. Son of man, why do you slumber? Get up, present your petition, pour out prayer, seek forgiveness from the Master of Masters. Wash and purify, do not tarry, for the days will soon pass. Quickly seek assistance from the one who dwells on high. From sin and evil, run away and be fearful of accidental infractions. Please listen to those who know your name, Israel, your faithful people. Justice belongs to you, shame to us. You are the source of justice, God. We are the ones who have shame, but you are the one who is just. The poem goes on. Amod kegever v'hitgaber להתוודות על חטאים, יעל דרוש בכובד ראש לכפר על פשעים, כי לעולם לא נעלם ממנו נפעלים, וכל מאמר אשר יאמר לפניו הם נקראים, המרחם הוא ירחם עלינו כרחם אב על בנים, לך השם הצדקה, ולנו בושת הפנים. Stand up like a man, be strong, confess your sins. Seek God with sincerity to atone for transgressions, since forever wonders are not beyond him, and any word uttered reaches him. The merciful one will have mercy like a father for children. Justice belongs to you, shame to us. Pardon me for this joke, but the opening line here on this slide reminds me of an old joke from there's a comedy troupe here in Israel called the Gashash HaChiver, and one time somebody is talking to somebody who is going through marital difficulties, and they say to him, Tiyeh gever tashpil et atzmecha. Be a man, be strong, and ask for forgiveness. And this is, what it's saying here. Be a gever, stand up like a man. And what does it mean to stand up like a man? Stand up like a man is somebody who is willing to confess for the fact that he's sinned, and to seek God with sincerity. So this is perhaps the most famous and the most popular of Sephardic Slicha poems that are recited commonly in this country. And I'll talk about this in the continuation. The Ashkenazic Slichot in this country are starting to adopt some of the elements of Sephardic Slichot, and this is one of the poems that often gets adopted. And this poem is very often the lead poem of a Sephardic Slicha service. For those of you who are interested, you can the slides for this presentation have been posted, and if you want, you can go to this link in the National Library of Israel, and you can hear 28 different versions of Ben Adam Malacha Nirdam. how the Jews of Morocco chanted, how the Jews of Tunisia chanted, how the Jews of Yemen chanted, and that's all available for free in the website of the National Library of Israel, where there are many treasures of Jewish texts and Jewish songs. Okay, so that's a Sephardic Slicha poem. Now let's compare that to the first Slicha program, the first Slicha poem that we will recite. Those of us who go to Ashkenazic Slichot, the Slicha poem, the first one that we will recite 2.5 weeks from now, when Slichot begin on Saturday night. Here we are pretty sure we have the name of the author of this poem. His name is Binyamin ben Zerach. It's likely that he lived in Italy. We don't know for sure. Later on in the sessions, probably not today, I'll offer an argument about why it is that people think that that he lived in Italy, and it's pretty clear that he lived in the 11th century because you can begin to find this poem showing up in Slicha collections from the 11th and the 12th century. Okay, again, I'll read through the Hebrew here and then the English. Ech niftach pe lefanecha dar metuchim be'elu fanim nishpoch sichim, ga'alnu netivotecha hayesharim v'hanechochim, davaknu betoivot uvemaasim zenuchim, halachnu acharei masot shav umaduchim, v'ikshinu oref v'he'aznu metzachim, za'amta b'shalanu, beit mishkenot mivtachim, charav ufas reach nichochim. How can we open our mouths before you, O dweller of the spread out heavens? How can we face you and pour out prayer? We have defiled your straight, decent ways. We have clung to abominations and insignificant deeds. We have trailed after false delusions and deceptions. We've been obstinate and insolent. So you took out your anger on the house we relied on. Now it is destroyed. Its sweet savor has ceased. I'll say some things about it, but I want to finish reading through the entire poem before we say anything about the poem. Kama yisartanu al yedei tzirim ushluchim lo hikshavnu lishmoa lemochechim me'az va'ad ata anachnu nidachim neheragim v'nishchatim v'nitbachim sorabnu metei ma'at ben kotzim kesuchim einenu chalot b'li mitzor ravachim. How often did you admonish us through prophetic messengers? We did not heed the words of rebuke. Ever since, we have been driven far away, murdered, massacred, slaughtered. Only a few have survived amongst the thorns. Our eyes are dimmed and find no relief. Korchei amcha asher lebel shochachim Sefer va'erev lama matzlichim kamim lemulach ne'atzot sochachim ritzutzim bama atem potchim shochen ad v'kadosh tzvei be'elbon anuchim temuchim alecha uvecha mutachim. And you can see I put in red here, if you can see the slide, you can see how Binyamin assigned his name here to this Slicha. Benoraot yemincha nivashea linsachim, ki arachamecha harabim anu betuchim. And this leads into a line in the liturgy, ki arachamecha harabim anu betuchim, which is one of the lines of the kind of frame of Slichot. I put the word label on the slide here in blue because we will get back to talk about that word, but I don't want to talk about it yet. Your people's oppressors who bow down to Bel morning and evening, why do they prosper? They arise against you and they insultingly ask us, whom do you battered ones depend on? You are holy and dwell forever. See the humiliation of us who sigh, who rely upon you and stick with you. May your wondrous right hand save us for all eternity. for we trust in your abundant mercy. Okay, so now we have read the most well-known Sephardic Slicha and the opening Sephardic Slicha. Would anybody like to write in the chat what you see, if you like compare these two poems to each other, what are the differences between these two poems? I think there are many, but does anybody want to jump in? You can send it as a private message if you don't want to sign your name to it. What do you see as the biggest differences between these two poems, the opening Sephardic poem and the opening Ashkenazic poem? Nobody wants to jump in?
I think that the Ashkenazi doesn't seem to have nearly as much psukim hinted at compared to the Sephardi one.
Okay, the Sephardic one, yes, it's playing with psukim. That's very nice. Anything else? Someone writes here, Ashkenazi ones are more dark and depressing, while the Sephardi ones are melodious and inspiring. Incidentally, Rabbi Kelman has just posted into the chat that if you want to see the sources without the gray area, you can access them from the website.
I don't know if anybody else, but it got worse. I don't know if I'm the only one, but now you can almost not see anything. I'm sorry, just letting you know, which is why I.
Thank you. And on my screen, everything is.
Maybe you want to unshare and try
Yeah.
sharing again. Maybe I have no idea, but tech is not my area.
You suggesting that maybe I stop sharing and try
Yeah,
sharing?
stop sharing, and then you can start again and see maybe it'll help. And if not,
I'll see if that works.
we'll access it by the website. Like here, I think that'll be better.
Yes. Any better?
No.
Not really. Okay, so I just recommend you don't share. That's slightly better, but and people can access it from the website or when I put in the chat box.
I'm really sorry about the.
It's okay. You read it. People can follow.
Okay.
They won't. They'll see it on their own screen. Yeah. It's you don't like looking gray all over the place. So I would just unshare your screen.
So I should stop sharing the screen?
Yeah, I think that's better. I don't know if everybody agrees with me, but I'll make yeah. Stop sharing your screen.
Able to access the sources from the link that
yeah,
Rabbi...
the sources on the link. Everybody can click and look at the sources, or they'll listen to Torah Bal Peh.
Yeah, right. Okay. We have one other. Okay, I'll stop doing that, and I'll just open it up for myself so that I can see the presentation. Okay. So Zamira says the Ashkenazi one deals with such despair. The Sephardi one is more related to the individual. I think that's an excellent point. The Sephardi one is actually giving some responsibility to human beings. It is saying, you can do something, while this opening Ashkenazi one says pretty clearly, we are just in a terrible situation. We can't do anything.
Yeah.
We are being battered. We are being killed. We are being butchered, and just turning to God. Someone once said to me that there isn't such a big difference between the Slicha poems that we recite in Selichot and the Kinot program poems that we recite on Tisha B'Av. They're both on the same theme. We Ashkenazim are bemoaning our fate. A number of because these poems were mostly written sometime around 1,000 years ago, because they were written in the Middle Ages, it might be really a function of the experience of Jews in Ashkenazic countries, where the Jews in Ashkenazic countries felt powerless. And so they were turning to God in their powerless situation and saying, God, you have to do something about the situation that we are in. Gerson Cohen, who was my professor's professor, I studied with David Berger was one of the important professors in my life, and Professor Berger got his PhD from the direction of Professor Gerson Cohen. And Professor Berger once assigned to me to read an article that Gerson Cohen had written about called Ashkenazic and Sephardic postures on messianism. This is dealing with a period of about 1,000 years ago. That one of the arguments in that article was that the Jews who lived in Ashkenazic countries saw themselves as being powerless and unable to control the situation that was around them, and they were turning to God and asking God to try to help them with the difficult situation that they were in. Jews in Sephardic countries, not always, but often, they were in a situation where they felt that they could do things. This led to, Professor Cohen argued in his article, this led to a funny kind of distinction between the countries. Professor Cohen counted up how many messianic movements there were in the middle of the Middle Ages in Sephardic countries and in Ashkenazic countries, and he came to the conclusion that there were next to zero in Ashkenazic countries, and there were dozens in Sephardic countries, and he came to the conclusion that people are into thinking about messianism when they feel some power. That when to look around and to say, this person is the Messiah. I have identified who is going to come and who's going to save the Jewish people. That ironically, Professor Cohen came to the conclusion that it isn't the people who are suffering most who are looking around and saying, this person is the Messiah. It's actually the more powerful people who come to the conclusion that we know that we can identify who the Messiah is. And if anybody wants to connect this to messianic movements, either in the United States or in Israel, you can do so in your mind, but I won't go there in this session. So trying to be able to see my slides and to see some of you at the same time. I think I've managed to do that. Now, in that at the end of this poem that we Ashkenazim will recite at the opening session of Selichot, we refer to ourselves as being Neheragim, Nishchatim, V'nitbachim, murdered, massacred, and slaughtered. And we refer to the oppressors as being people who bow down to Bel. If you look in the Judaica Press, if you look at the Judaica Press edition of the Selichot, you see here an interesting claim. These are the footnotes on this poem that we just read through the opening Ashkenazic Slicha poem, all references to other nations or peoples apply to the period immediately after the destruction of the temple. Why do they say that? Why would somebody in the 11th century write a poem and talk about us being murdered, massacred, and slaughtered, but actually they're only referring to the situation after the destruction of the temple? Well, actually, with apologies to the Judaica press, Selichot, this simply is not true. And what about that line there where I highlighted in blue the name of the god to which the oppressors are bowing down? It says, Porchei Amcha, your people's oppressors who bow down to Bel. So the footnotes here in the Judaica press, Selichot, say that Bel is a contraction of Baal, the Canaanite god, and it might also be a reference to the Babylonian god of light. Why would Binyamin in Italy in the 11th century be writing a poem that talks about the oppression that is coming from the people who worship Baal? Well, the answer is very simple, that in the printed text of the Selichot, the version that we have here that says Porchei Amcha Asher Label Shochachim is the censored version of this poem. That isn't what the poem originally said. The best edition of the Selichot is the edition that was published by Daniel Goldschmidt, the most scientific edition of the Selichot. And if you look here, this is slide number 14, if you're following along in the PDF. Porchei Amcha, it says here, Asher Lamet Shochachim. Those who oppress your people, who bow down to the dead one. In the excellent edition of the Selichot, this is now slide number 15, and the excellent edition of the Selichot that was published recently by Koren here in Jerusalem, with very fine notes written by Rabbi J.J. Schachter. Rabbi Schachter writes in his note on this Slicha, the scholarly consensus is that the original text was Porchei Amcha Asher Lamet Shochachim, your people's oppressors who pray to the one who died, a reference to Jesus. And then Rabbi Schachter writes, this formulation was later considered to be too disrespectful to Christianity, and therefore the text was changed to a milder formulation. So the question is, what Rabbi Schachter is actually suggesting here, that because it was too disrespectful, they decided to change the text so that it wouldn't be clear that they were referring to the Christians in this Slicha. You know, I think Rabbi Schachter is right, but the question is, why was it changed? Was it changed because we reached a period in history where Jews wanted to be more respectful of Christianity, or did we reach a period in history where Jewish books were being censored, and where if you had something in the book that was insulting to Christianity, many of you who study Talmud will know that there are passages in the Talmud that are insulting to Christianity, and you can't find them in old editions of the Talmud. Here in Eretz Yisrael, here in the land of Israel, when Rabbi Steinsaltz Zichrono Livracha published his Gemara, he put these texts back into the Gemara, not because Rabbi Steinsaltz hated Christians, but just because he felt that it wasn't necessary to succumb to the pressure of the censors, and presumably that is what happened here. That either because outside censors were reading the Jewish text, or because Jews were censoring their own texts, and they were censoring them for self-protection and not because they really wanted to be more respectful to Christianity. So that's another problem with a number of the Selichot in the liturgy that we Ashkenazim recite. There are a number of anti-Christian comments scattered in these Selichot. I remember when I was a kid, I first noticed in the little Selicha pamphlet that I was using that there was a footnote at the bottom that said that any reference to non-Jews in this collection is to the non-Jews in ancient time, which is actually what in slide number 13 was actually what the Judaica Press people said. All references to other nations or people applied to the period immediately after the destruction of the temple. In other words, if somebody's saying something insulting about non-Jews in this poem, they're saying something insulting about the Romans, and there aren't any Romans anymore, and so we don't really feel terribly bad about saying anything bad about it. But really, truthfully, these are poems that are anti-Christian, that not all of them, certainly not all of them, and not even a majority of them, but there are a number of poems here in the collection that Ashkenazim say where the Ashkenazim are bemoaning the fact. Go back and look at the last slide of the poem itself, which is slide number 12. You notice that the oppressors of the people are turning. They are arising against you, kamim lemulach, ne'atzot sochachim, and they're insultingly asking us, whom do you battered ones depend on? In other words, they're battering us, and they're saying, how can you guys, where is that God of yours? And the poet here is turning to God and saying to God, don't you see that the situation that we are in here, our enemies think that they are the powerful ones. Our enemies think that you are powerless because of the fact that we are suffering. So that seems to be the simplest understanding, and I think the correct understanding of at least this opening poem that we will be reciting in the Ashkenazic Selichot. If anybody still wants to go to Ashkenazic Selichot after going to these sessions here. Okay, so I found an article written by a scholar named Avishai Elboim about the process of censorship or self-censorship of Selichot. If you're following along in the slides here, it's slide number 16. He found the earliest edition of Selichot, he argued. I haven't done the research, but he said the earliest edition of Selichot that has a little apology in it, saying we have to explain what all these references are to what the non-Jews are doing and to the suffering that we have here. So this is an edition of Selichot that was published in Vilna in 1841 that reads as follows. כל הסליחות המקובצים פה מכמה גאונים מהם נתקנו על הצרות והגזירות אשר היה בעת החורבן, אשר היינו לבז ולמשיסה בין העמים אשר ישבנו בתוכם, ואנו מזכירים ימי הצרות והיגון אשר עברו עלינו ושופכים שיחנו לפני השם להיותם כפרה על עווננו. All the slichot gathered here from the works of many great rabbis, some of them were written about the events around the time of the destruction of the temple, when we were plundered and crushed by the nations among whom we lived. We recount the tragedies and the sorrows of what happened to us. We pour out our hearts to God that these events may atone for our sins. In other words, this apologist here for the poems is saying, actually, these poems are simply talking about the terrible situation the Jews were in after the destruction of the temple, and they're turning to God and saying to God, remember, this is a poet, we said in the 11th century, who is, according to this explanation, is turning to God and saying to God, remember the suffering that we had 1,000 years ago, and because of that, we hope that suffering will atone for our sins, because the author, the editor of this collection of Selichot from Vilna in 1840 didn't want to say that the author of the Slicha, who was clearly living in a Christian country, he didn't want to say that the author of the Slicha was saying something negative about the Christians. And then he goes on, this is slide number 17. He says, so some of the Slichot, he just said in the last slide, some of these Slichot were because of the events that had happened right after the destruction of the temple, but others were about events going on in the days of the author of the Slichot. I'll just read this to save time. I'll read it just in the English. Other Slichot were written about the difficulty of our time, that it is so hard to make a living, how everyone chases a livelihood and none succeed. So some of the Slichot were actually written about problems in the days of the writers of these Slichot who lived, let's say, back in the 11th.
He froze.
Okay, I was about to ask if it's just me or no. Okay. Hopefully he'll unfreeze.
Of the Slichot,
Although,
lowliness, pain.
Marty, you froze for about 30 seconds. The last 30 seconds we didn't hear. I'm sorry.
Okay. I hope I'm back now.
Yeah, you're back now. It was about 30 seconds.
Okay. So this apologist here who was saying that the poems, the real problems of that are being described by the poet here are the big problems after the destruction of the temple. But then he says in slide number 17, but actually there were problems in the days of the authors of these poems, but that problem was just how difficult it was to make a living. And so this author living in Vilna, in a Christian country in 1841, feels no problem saying that the Jews who were living in Christian countries 800, 900 years before that had difficulty making a living. That's not insulting to the Christians, just, well, it was the 11th and the 12th century. So, accordingly, when you see the following words in one of the Slichot, lowliness, pain, sorrow, lost, scattered, oppression, or duress, let's read those words in Hebrew on the left side of the slide. Shiflut, tsa'ar, yagon, avudim, nidchim, lachatz, and dochak.
Problems.
Froze again.
Yes. So everybody's so nice and patient.
What option do we have? But it's question of respect.
I'm sorry? Well, okay, yeah. I think he got booted off, which, no, maybe not. I don't know where he went. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
So, I
I
apologize.
just started reading the Hebrew. You froze again.
Okay, so the author, this apologist, the editor of the Selichot in 1841 suggests that the following Hebrew words, shiflut, tsar, yagon, avudim, nidchim, lachatz, dochak, all of those words are only about the difficulty of making a living. That's what those poets back in the 11th and 12th century were writing about, the difficulty of making a living, for we are very impoverished. However, whenever you find stronger words, in the Hebrew here in slide 18, of Makom asher nizkar, shama, biza, cheruf, giduf, hereg, hakavana hakol al hazman ha'avar, achar hachurban. But when you find those stronger words like devastation, plundering, abuse, cursing, killing, they are referring to the long ago times after the destruction of the temple. You know, I ask myself when I read an apology like this, it seems pretty obvious to me that the person who wrote this didn't think that that he was writing something that was truthful. But he wrote it anyways, that this is what you should distinguish between these two groups of negative words that appear in these poems of Selichot. Did he think that his audience would be convinced by what he said? Well, maybe he thought that the censors would be convinced by what he said. But if we're talking, then we get to the question of why are we reciting poems that are actually about events that occurred 1800 years before 1841. And we still said, here's what he says about that at the bottom of this slide number 18. And we still say these prayers to thank God and to express our gratitude to those nations under whose protection we now live, for all the kindness that they bestow on us. For we clearly sense the difference between the evil of the past and the tranquility and serenity of our own days. But now, living in Vilna in 1841, we have Shalva v'hashket b'yameinu, we have tranquility, we have serenity. And so the reason why we read these poems about the past is so that we can be grateful for what we have right now, when we remember that 2,000 years ago, 1,800 years before this, we did not have this tranquility and serenity. Okay, so this is the oldest. The scholar who did research on the subject found that this is the oldest apology about the Selichot found in this edition from almost 200 years ago from Vilna. And then he said, furthermore, when these prayers mention freeing the captives or people who are crushed or oppressed, they are references to our current poverty and the difficulties of our times, and we pray to God that he will lift us up and improve our lot. So some of these poems still are relevant to us because we have it's difficult for us to make a living here, and so we're praying to God about improving the lot of our life. Okay, that's the oldest kind of apology in a collection of Selichot, and here's one that's not quite that's not quite as old as this. And this collection of Selichot that I found, obviously the person who wrote the apology in this collection of Ashkenazi Selichot was a little more of a scholar, and you'll see what he writes here. I'll read it in English. This book is a collection of prayers and supplications that were composed by Paitanim, wise Jews who lived between the end of the 5th century of the 5th millennium, i.e. the 8th century of the Common Era, until the 1st century of the 6th millennium, the end of the 13th century CE. So this scholar, the author of this note in this collection of Selichot from 140 odd years ago says that these Selichot were written between the 8th and the 13th century. You can tell that the author of this note is a little more of a scholar, more of a modern person, because he throws in the CE date. He doesn't only give you the traditional Jewish date. Some of them were established to be recited only by the Jews in those days, and the bolding is in the original in this original in this collection of Selichot from 1879. This is slide number 21. They were Rak L'Yisrael Shabi Mehem. So this author in 1879 is suggesting these things were written to be said at a particular period of time. שיתפללו להשם על אודות הצרות האיומות שצררו אז העמים לישראל וירעצו וירוצצום בימים ההם כידוע ליודעי העתים וקורות ישראל. These were prayers to God concerning the terrible persecutions by which the Gentiles in those days attacked the Jews, crushing and humiliating them, as those who know Jewish and general history are well aware. So this apologist in this edition of Selichot from 1879 is saying that actually in the High Middle Ages, between the 8th century and the 13th century, the Jews were not treated well, and anybody who knows Jewish and general history is aware of this, and that's why they wrote these poems, because they were trying to deal with the situation that they were living here in. These prayers serve today as monuments to Jews, so that they will give thanks to God who redeemed them from their enemies and caused the nations among whom they live today to treat them with compassion. Just the amazing claim here in Vilna in 1879. When we read these poems, what do we think? We think about the fact that now in Vilna, at the end of the 19th century, we are living among people who are treating us with compassion and not the way that our forefathers were treated 1,000 years ago when these poems were being written. He says, however, you should know the majority of the poems are prayers to God concerning forgiving sins and pardoning iniquities. These were established to be recited in all generations. And all together, this collection is called Selichot, since the latter group is bigger and the most important one, the one that was established for all generations. So we call these Selichot because quite a few of the poems are about Selicha. He argues that the majority of them fall in that category. And it looks like he's suggesting that he said it fairly clearly in the top of slide number 21. They were established to be recited only by the Jews in those days. But of course, as we all know, changing the liturgy is not an easy thing to do. And not only in Canada today, but here in Jerusalem also, when Jews will get together 2.5 weeks from now to recite on the first night of Selichot. In Ashkenazic synagogues, people will recite this Selicha. And maybe so it's unclear how many people, when reciting the Selichot, are actually thinking about what they are saying and what it means. And perhaps some of the people who are thinking about it will say, as this apologist here suggests, well, it's really nice that we're living in a better situation now than the people were living in back in those days. Okay, again, I apologize for the problems with the technology. If anybody has any questions they'd like to ask now, and if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask a question, I'm willing to answer.
The liturgy, what you wrote, what you read, if I'm looking since October 7, I think there is nothing better than that. Even we're not talking about our personal, as a nation, we are right there.
I hear your point, and
yeah. So I'm sorry to say, but that's the way I feel. And we are, and that person who wrote it, maybe he was a prophet, but he
Yes.
talks about our own feeling.
Yes.
Thank
So
you.
I totally understand that, but there is a giant difference, despite the fact that the words, I agree totally, words like neheragim, nitzbachim, nishchatim, sadly they are relevant, but the way in which the Jewish people is dealing with that is through tzahal, through the powerlessness of that the poet is describing here, and how the oppressors say to us, "Oh, we see that your God is powerless. Who are you counting on?" That I don't think that is the precise experience that we are experiencing these days. But what you say is a valid point.
Hi, Marty. Could I ask a very
Please.
basic question? When did Selichot start? Do they have the weight of halakha, or are they just a very strong minhag?
So, yes, Marty's question is there really a halacha of reciting slichot? Well, in the collections of halacha, it does say that's mashkimim l'slichot, that you should get up early on these days and you should recite the slichot. In the next week, we will talk a little bit about the issue of reciting a liturgy that. What do you do when you're reciting a liturgy that isn't precisely the liturgy that speaks to the situation? A liturgy that is a liturgy of powerlessness, and so one of the ways in which some people have dealt with this is the way that Ari Geiger, in that article, we will get back to Ari Geiger's article next week. I began with it where he said, he stopped going to Ashkenazic slichot and he goes to Sephardic slichot, because this is not what you hear when you go to Sephardic slichot. When you go to Sephardic slichot, you hear Ben Adam Malach Nirdam. What are you doing sleeping? Come on, you can do something about this. As opposed to this slicha, which describes the powerlessness of the Jewish people, which was definitely true when Binyamin ben Zerach wrote this poem 1,000 years ago. Okay. I look forward to seeing you next week, and I will try to solve the technological problem before that. And I wish you all the best. And those of you, if there are any Sephardim here who are already going to Selichot, or anybody here in Jerusalem who's going into various Selichot celebrations here in Jerusalem, I hope that you find meaning in these prayers.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, I have yet to go to a Sephardi slichot, but I don't know, maybe I'll look around. Although I don't want to say them Olav Elul, even if they're much nicer.
That's right. That is part of the problem. Yes, it comes with a price tag, which
Right.
is already started saying slichot. My sister-in-law, who's visiting here in Jerusalem from New York, got up to go Selichot at 5 o'clock in the morning a couple of days ago, because she heard how wonderful Sephardic Selichot are. And so, there's a certain price that you pay if you decide that you're going to do what Ari Geiger said of switching over and becoming a Sephardi.
All right, okay, thank you. And that's Rabbi Moshe Shulman at 1 o'clock on why there's no tshuva on Rosh Hashanah. And tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., Rabbi Slipkin on exotic shofars. Okay, and we look forward to learning with you. Please invite a friend. Let's hear good news and all good things. Okay, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day.